I think the problem is that there's a specific kind of culture in certain black communities, isn't there, in America, that's very adversarial towards authority in general.
I don't know.
And,
Tell me about that.
Well, do you not? I mean, do you not think that I don't know how you describe them, gangster culture, something like that? The you know the sort of thing I'm talking about, right?
No, not really.
I do know
young people are far more likely. I do know young people are far more likely to be adversarial with adults and authority. So if you're young and you're black, or even any color for that matter, then you're more likely to have a violent confrontation with a police officer.
Yeah, but I think that the segments I'm talking about are not the segments who are actually real Black Lives Matter supporters. I mean, talking specifically about the rioters, those sorts of people who go and burn down buildings, go and flip over police cars, go and beat people on the basis of their race. I don't really think they are actually Black Lives Matter supporters. I think they're just people who live in a certain type of culture that really hates the police and hates authority in general.
That's why it's so problematic, though. In your video where you're talking about Black Lives Matter, you lay at the feet of the organization and the ideology these people who are no more supportive of Black Lives Matter than anyone else. Like, they won't even come out to these people that you're talking about. They're not going to come out and march to an actual protest.
But they do come out as soon as there is a protest, though, don't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, but there's insurrectionists that show up at every single protest. I've been at an Occupy Wall Street protest. I've been at a Occupy the DNC protest. And at every protest I've ever been at, there is an element of insurrectionists, anarchists who want to cause a confrontation. I've actually documented it at the DNC, where over 99% of the people out there were peacefully protesting. But there was about 5 people who could have triggered a mass riot because they wanted to fight the police. And so we can't lay that at the feet of the 99% that were out there. There's always going to be insurrectionists in every crowd.
Okay, well, then that begs the question, whose job is it to keep the problem elements out of your movement?
The police. I mean, well, again, now, well, there's the thing that you slipped in there at the very end of the statement. They're not a part of anyone's movement.
They turn up. They take part.
Would you agree with this, that people of this particular culture that you're describing, that, I mean, I would love for you to describe more.
Well, I don't really know. I don't want to describe it in a way that you would consider racist. You know, I'm not trying to be.
I'm not sensitive like that. Sure, give it your best shot.
I would call it thug culture. You know, the sort of gangster rapper sort of culture.
I've seen plenty of white kids who, like, I mean, the consumers of rap and gangster culture are white.
I don't mean middle class kids who are rebelling against their parents by listening to Ice-T. I mean the
not listen to Ice-T anymore, but I got you.
You know what I mean? Come on.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But you do know what I mean with the sort of, you know, I mean, the Milwaukee riot was just the most classic example, because you would see all of these guys, they don't have shirts on, they're covered in tattoos, they've got loads of bling, their trousers around their asses and all this sort of thing. And it's obvious that this comes from a certain kind of insular culture. You know,
I mean, that's the culture is what
I wouldn't say you were part of that culture. You know, I wouldn't say that you were part of that culture.
I mean, but I guess you wouldn't know that I actually grew up around that culture that you're trying to describe.
Right, so you know what I'm talking about then. Right? This is the thing.
Let's not pretend, right? So yes, sure. There is a I personally call it a subculture, right? There's a subculture in every culture. There's a subculture, and there's a subculture that has an intersection of poverty, and where you find poverty, you're going to find violence. I mean, there's almost there's a direct correlation between the economic plight and the amount of violence and crime in your community. So yes, I mean, it exists, but they are not what you put at the end of your last statement was that they are a part of the movement. And I wanted to say that, I mean, I think
I don't think they are. I don't think
one thought real quick, that these people that you're describing, they have no more respect for the Black Lives Matter movement than they do for the police, right? So just because they're running around saying, you know, F Trump, F white people, it doesn't automatically affiliate them with anything that's actually trying to happen in a positive Black Lives Matter movement. So we're no more responsible for them than Gamergate would be responsible for someone who's sending rape threats, right?
I totally agree. And this is something that I have been trying to point out to people. It's like, look, you know, it's very difficult to hold people accountable for things that they're not responsible for. This is why I asked you who should be responsible for keeping these people away from your protests, because one of the things we did in Gamergate was literally just hound them until they left, until they stopped. Yes. I mean, we would go on mass reporting campaigns if we saw anything untoward being sent towards any Sarkeesian or whoever. And I mean, it was the best we could do. And yet the media still condemned us roundly as
absolutely. And it's the perfect example of taking fringe examples and trying to apply it to a broader movement when it simply doesn't apply. I mean, I've been at the protests where you've had Black Lives Matter activists who are trying to stop the insurrectionists, right? So this happens on a case-by-case basis at every protest. But let me ask you, like, out of all the protests, because you've done a lot of research on Black Lives Matter, how many of the protests have you found that devolved into some type of riot or violence?
Honestly, the only ones that really get coverage are the ones that devolve into riots and violence. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. In the last 900 days, a year and a half, there have been over 1,800 Black Lives Matter protests. And how many of them have we even heard about? Right? Most of us don't even know that many exist. And then how many of them actually turning violent? I mean, if we had 1,800 protests turning violent every single time, I'm sure the National Guard would be out at this point. So it's like people try to take a microcosm and try to apply it as a broader trend when there's no form or fashion, any type of trend.
Yeah, and then that's totally fair. We don't get to hear about those Black Lives Matter protests that aren't doing something wrong, basically, that are actually standing up for a legitimate issue. And I mean, it's probably something to do with the 24-hour news cycle, where they just want the headline-grabbing stories.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I mean, I have to say, I have seen very dubious rhetoric coming from people who are Black Lives Matter affiliated staunchly. And I mean, the founder of Black Lives Matter Toronto tweeted out, "Please, Allah, give me the power not to cuss or kill these white people and men out here today," or something.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine a white person saying something like that about black people and then not being driven out of wherever they were. You know,
I mean, no, but they do on a regular. I mean, have you read your comment section, like on the Black Lives Matter video? I just perused the comment section, and I mean, every violent type of racist jargon possible was there. But that doesn't negate what you're saying, right?
I don't see it, I'm afraid.
I have screenshots.
No. Send me them. You know, I read my comments all the time, and I don't. Yeah, if I do see anything that's overtly hateful, then I just remove it because I don't want that on my video.
It's there. I'll send it to you. I might can pull it up on the screen here, but I'll send it. But your bigger point to the founder of Black Lives Matter in Toronto. Yeah. So if you and I decided to get together and start an international chapter of Black Lives Matter, we just make an agreement and boom, it's done. So there's no like central organization that's overriding any of these individual organizations, right? It's very decentralized. That doesn't excuse what she said. However, I mean, there's almost in every culture, there's this colloquial of "Lord, give me strength," right? It's just a standard thing that people say. For her, Lord is Allah. Allah, give me strength. But it became so much more nefarious because she said Allah instead of Lord. And another thing, I looked her up, right? So she has like 1,000 followers on Twitter. I mean, she's not really representative of many people there. That doesn't excuse what she says, but it also doesn't make her the spokesperson for Black Lives Matter.
No, it doesn't. It's just this is my problem, though, isn't it? It's like there's never. It seems like a sort of no true Black Lives Matter supporter. No matter what's said, the bubble kind of shrinks until we've okay, none of these people are now representative. And at what point do we stop? You know.
Yeah, well, I mean, the same question could be begged, right, of any other movement, right? And the best example is, of course, Gamergate, right? We all reject every organization rejects the fringe elements of their organization, and I think it's safe to say that every organization, even just the organization of white America, right? It's not an actual organization, but white America itself, though it's not organized, has very extreme elements that should be rejected, but we're kind of moving into an era where it's less rejected. So it's just kind of the burden of having a platform. Coattails, people will always ride your coattails with their individual agenda, no matter how detrimental it is. I mean, even at the top of your page on Twitter, you've pinned something that I think is brilliant, letting people know never to make a threat. Right. Yeah. Because it does a disservice. And that's something that you have to communicate And that's something that Black Lives Matter on a regular basis has to communicate. So we're all plagued by it. But the question is, who actually is defining us by that? And it seems as though, to me, right, it seems as though that you want to define Black Lives Matter by these edge fringe examples, but you reject the idea of someone defining Gamergate or even yourself as an individual by the edge examples of your followers. And
well, no, I'm actually more than happy to delineate between, I mean, legitimate Black Lives Matter supporters. I mean, I'd say like D. Ray and Sean King were definitely the more legitimate side of Black Lives Matter.